All right, I think it's time to get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Cliff Lynch. I'm the director of the Coalition for Networked Information, and I welcome you to this breakout session, which is part of CNI's Spring 2020 virtual meeting, now in the beginning of its second month. It will run till the end of May. We'll be hearing from our presenter today. We will take questions at the end. Diane Goldenberg-Hart will materialize and moderate the Q&A. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to queue up questions at any point during the presentation. I'd urge you to ask questions as they occur to you, and that will save us time at the end when we go to answer them. Our topic today is data science support and how to build capacity through graduate fellowship programs. This is a very timely issue. Certainly in our recent work on emerging technologies that will have high impact on research libraries in the next few years that we've been doing jointly with ARL and EDUCAUSE. Data science has been identified as one of the top priorities. It's really, I'm a little uneasy calling it a technology because it's really a group of related technologies and skills. But how to build sufficient capacity for it is a major challenge at all of our institutions. And I'm delighted to have Jeffrey Oliver from the University of Arizona, who will be presenting on behalf of a team who you can see listed on this slide here, who will talk about their experiences and strategies in this area. Thank you so much for doing this, Jeff. And without further ado, over to you.
Thanks, Cliff. Thanks for that introduction. And thanks to all of you who are here today. So the first thing I want to start with is to recognize the collaborators that I'm working with on this program. So this has largely been a collaboration between myself and Dr. Vignesh Subin in the College of Engineering to create a program for graduate students to support data science at the University of Arizona. It's further supported by the University of Arizona Data Science Institute, first with Susan Miller, who retired on Friday, and now by Malika Oxman. So without these folks, this work just would not have been possible. When I usually talk about data science, usually the first thing we have to do is really to define the term data science. So if you look on Google, these are the top suggested questions that folks are asking. And I think they're pretty telling because they're really asking questions about what this field is and how to explain it in terms that a normal person can actually understand. And so that's what I want to start with, is just what do I mean when I say data science, and try to do it without a lot of jargon. So I look at data science, and this is one definition, not the only definition, but one, which is really this this overlap of three fields. And the overlap of computer science, really is to use advanced mathematics and statistics and apply those technologies to some area of interest, some domain such as biology or astronomy or linguistics, and really to address questions in those areas. And data science also includes really critical skills around communication and ethics that is sometimes overlooked, but really data science for the purposes of this talk is going to be the overlap of these three areas. Now, I think that as Cliff mentioned in the introduction, there's really a consistent growing interest in data science. Going back to Google, if you look at the searches for the phrase, what is data science, for the past 10 years, you can see a steady climb upward in that search. And just, I want to take 10 seconds and have you look at that graph and notice that every year there's a spike. So what is the spike? And although I can't say for sure, one of the things that it does correspond with is that's the start of the academic school year. So I suspect that when folks are looking for majors, when they come to college, they're typing in what is data science. So that's kind of a fun look at the data. And when I consider this definition of data science as being the overlap of computer science, mathematics, and subject matter, very frequently that third element is not discussed much. So really the subject matter expertise is super important to the field of data science and to being able to making meaningful inferences using those approaches from mathematics and statistics in some domain. Very frequently we talk about machine learning or neural networks or some part of data science where we sort of forget the subject matter as expertise. So the challenge, of course, is that there are a lot of domains across the college campus. These are just some of the examples of the way data science is being used across domains. We have it being used in the field of English, just looking at actually who wrote texts, such as some of Shakespeare's works. We also see it playing a critical role in public health, in being able to provide sort of on-demand or at-the-moment help. And then finally, we're seeing a lot of data science applications in the field of biology, looking at how organisms are responding to changes in seasons, using data that are just too large to be analyzed through traditional approaches. I want to give a shout out at this point too to subject matter expertise. Earlier today, the team at UNC gave a really cool talk about using machine learning to identify Jim Crow laws. So really a prime example of how the libraries are engaging in the data science realm. So if you didn't get a chance to see their talk live earlier today, I would highly recommend going back to watch the recording because they did a really good job. So, and really showing how libraries are going to make a meaningful contribution in data science. So if we think about data science as being a very diverse realm, we can't really hire a subject matter expert in every domain in the libraries. It would be nice if those resources were available, but they're not. So how can we still support data science across campuses? And so if we think about supporting data science, what do we need to actually do that? So one thing we need is we need experience. So we need folks who have experience in applying modern computational and statistical approaches to address these domain level questions, to address questions in astronomy, questions in biology, questions in linguistics. And then we also need folks who have an interest in data science education, in helping others level up and gain access to the knowledge, skills, and abilities so that they can use data science approaches. And I should say that while Pandas is an important Python package for data science, this Panda is actually here to remind us that we would normally be in San Diego. This is from 2 years ago from the CNI meeting in 2018. It's a Panda from the San Diego Zoo, so a little bit of San Diego coming to you all, even though we couldn't be at San Diego. And so these needs of expertise and interest in data science education, there is considerable capacity for both of those in the graduate student population. And so there are several graduate students who actually have the in the trenches experience of learning how to do these new computational approaches and applying it to questions in their own domain. And then there's also an interest in actually helping others to acquire similar approaches and similar skills to be able to do the types of data science analyses in their own field. And so what we did is we created a program called the Data Science Ambassadors Fellowship. And what this does is this actually capitalizes on the knowledge that is present in the graduate student population, and it provides infrastructure so that they can support researchers in their data sciences needs. So what does the program actually do? So the first thing we do is we provide training to all those who are part of the Data Science Ambassadors program. And we start with actually the Carpentries Instructor Training. This is a 2-day program that happens It actually happens online for the most part, but it's a 2-day program where everyone in the training receives instruction on good pedagogy, especially for teaching computational skills, on the importance of motivation in creating a positive learning environment, and then also recognizing some important parts of the learning environment, such as imposter syndrome, the stereotype threat, and the idea of a growth versus a fixed mindset. So this is a really, really great training program, and I would say that even if you never become a carpentries instructor, it's a super useful program, and actually all of the materials are available online for anyone to use. So if you, even if you never teach a carpentries workshop, but are doing instruction in the realm of computational literacy, I highly recommend this training. So this is the first thing that we ask our ambassadors to go through, is this training. The next thing we do is we work with them to develop a roadmap of expectations. So each of the ambassadors creates what we call an engagement plan, where they lay out in each of the 2 semesters in which they'll be an ambassador, they lay out plans for how exactly they are going to serve the researchers in their particular domain. It's going to be tailored to the constituents that they serve, so really the scholars that are in their respective colleges, as well as their own expertise, what they feel comfortable providing support for, and what areas they may look to collaborators to help out. And on these engagement plans, it's an iterative process where the ambassadors draft an engagement plan. The directors, myself and Vignesh, provide feedback, and we usually go through a couple of rounds of the engagement plans till we get to a final draft. So one of the challenges with data science resources, and you probably see this on your own respective campuses as well, is that there are a lot of data science resources across campus, and there's really no one place that has all of the resources. And so what we've done is we started with a relatively slim document, a data science resource guide, and then we asked the ambassadors to curate this document that has all of the resources across campus that they can either use themselves or direct their respective colleges and to find support. So this resource guide includes various service units, as well as people who are working in specific data science areas. And it includes things like where they can get support for high performance computing, for statistical consulting, cloud computing resources. And the ambassadors have actually done a considerable job of contributing to this guide. So it sort of removes the burden of everybody going and searching the university's website to find resource X. We now have a single guide that they can use to navigate. Now, the ambassadors aren't doing all of this for free. There is a stipend that we provide. There's a lot of professional development that we're providing to the ambassadors, but we also recognize that labor is important and that graduate students should be compensated for their labor. And so we provide a small stipend, and it's not meant to replace a graduate assistantship or a TA-ship. Really, it's just to support a little bit of the efforts that they're doing. And this is one thing that you know we're mindful of, is that we're really only asking for about 15 to 30 hours of their time each semester. So we are really careful and mindful that grad students have a lot of work to do and that they are compensated for it. And so with the support from the University of Arizona Data Science Institute, they receive a small stipend for their efforts. But this is, as I mentioned before, like, we don't anticipate that this should take up all of their time, and it really should be taking up a minority of their time. And so how do we do this? One of the things that we really want to avoid is exploitation of graduate students. So there was one example where a graduate student, one of the data science ambassadors, somebody asked for help, and really at the end they were asking for the ambassador to do their homework for them. And so I provided a little bit of guidance, but actually the rest of the data science ambassador cohort did a really good job of how to handle this and how to actually, you know, it's okay to say no. And we use Slack for communications among the ambassadors, and the community did a really good job of supporting the ambassador with sort of guarding their own time and providing an appropriate level of support. Another thing we faced, not from the ambassadors and not from students, but from and this is a very minority reaction, is some of the faculty or some professors are not really excited about recommending this to their students. So the question is, why would I tell my student to do this? And so, we reiterate the benefits not only to the students, so there's a lot of networking opportunities, there are great skills development, but there's also benefits to the research group. So they can bring back best practices and provide training to the research. For some people, this is competition with data collection or analyses that their graduate students, quote unquote, should be doing. And there's only so much that we can do. Some folks are not interested in that, and that's okay. We still have enough. We have enough interest from the college without worrying too much about that. And so one of the things that we did, changes that we've made recently, is the first year we actually had a self-nomination process. And the second year we switched to have colleges actually nominate the candidates. And so one of the things that this does is it provides sort of buy-in from the colleges. It gives them agency because a lot of the colleges the first year weren't quite sure what the ambassadors were supposed to do or what they were for. And so by going through the colleges and asking the colleges to nominate the students, that gives them more agency, and they have a little bit better idea of what role the ambassadors could serve the college. Because we are asking the nominating units, the colleges in this case, for a stipend, it makes sense that they would have the choices to who to nominate. And actually, we also provide them the opportunity to nominate more than one ambassador if they have the support needs to do so. If we compare just the first, just look at the first 2 years, there's been growth in interest in the program. We've actually, from year 1 to year 2, we've doubled the number of colleges that there are ambassadors in, and the interest, like I said, just seems to go. And I just take a quick glance. This is not an exhaustive list of the sorts of things that the ambassadors have been doing, but they're providing a lot of consultations to scholars in their respective domains. They've been either instructors or helpers at 4 software carpentry workshops here at the University of Arizona. And they've also been standing up their own standalone workshops, doing workshops in things like common scripting languages such as R and Python. Orange is a really nice graphical user interface for data science applications, especially machine learning, as well as work in geographic information systems. And it's really cool. One of the things that doesn't show up in this slide, but I want to mention, is that this latest round of cohort, we have one ambassador to the College of Humanities and one ambassador to the College of Education. And these are realms that you may not immediately think of for data science, but it's really cool to see this ambassadorship program really reaching in and engaging with domains across the campus that are interested in data science. And different areas are at different levels of maturity in data science. And that's one of the things that's great about the ambassadors program, is that they're able to assess where folks need help, at what point in the sort of data science maturity cycle that they need help. These are some of the specific works that they've done, really surveying the landscape of needs for data science. As I said, we have an ambassador to the College of Humanities, and really introducing data science. I think the topic of the workshop that they ran was something like, what is humanities data and what do we do with it? That was really good. Another standalone workshop was the introducing machine learning with a great Python tool called PyTorch. And they've also gone beyond just doing individual one-off efforts. The first cohort of data science ambassadors actually were instrumental in launching the University of Arizona inaugural Women in Data Science event in 2019. There were over 100 folks who participated, and it was a great event. We've done it again this year, but it was the data science ambassadors who really provide impetus to get that started. The data science ambassadors in the second cohort are currently leading the organizational efforts for our 2020 Research Bazaar. And they've also been involved in a variety of other efforts, including the R Ladies one of our data science ambassadors, actually the local organizers for Our Lady workshops. And we also have another ambassador who's working quite a bit with the Code for Venezuela project. So that's the first 2 years. And the third cohort, actually, the deadline for applications was on Friday. And so it's 2020 and we're in the middle of a pandemic. And in the face of the economic crisis that's coming, there's concern about providing stipends for graduate students and what sorts of resources are going to be available. So I will be honest, I was a bit apprehensive about a response that we might get this year, and how it might diminish because of the current situation. But as it turns out, it was probably not something I needed to worry about. I think this is quite telling that despite the challenges that we're facing right now, the interest in the program really remains strong. Is that we had another 13 nominations from 5 colleges. And it's cool because there are some of these colleges, College of Science, the College of Ag and Life Sciences, they're clamoring for more data science ambassadors. They've actually nominated multiple graduate students to play a role in the data science ambassador program. So with that, I just want to close once more by thanking the folks who I've collaborated with. The slides that I have presented here are all available on Google Drive with the link, and the video is going to be posted later on, I'm sure. And I want to, again, thank especially Vignesh Subin, who's the co-director of the Data Science Ambassadors Program. It was really through working with him that we really launched this. At this point, I'll stop and I will address the questions that you have, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be moderated by Diane.
Yes, it will.
Great.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for your great talk. That was really interesting and fascinating to see. I was particularly interested to hear that you have an ambassador in the College of Humanities, and I was curious to know if that was a targeted recruit or if that was a spontaneously occurred on its own, or is that something that you guys are looking to balance your portfolio? How did that happen?
Yeah, so the first, it wasn't necessarily targeted. We didn't reach out to, we sort of put the call out to all college deans to see, to gauge interest. And it really is, but there is a intentional diversification on the part of the directors to engage with lots of colleges. So one of the things we did not design a program to support a bunch of graduate students in the computer science department. That's not the purpose of the Data Science Ambassadors Program. And so really it's a matter of trying to engage with as many colleges as possible across the campus. So yeah, good question.
Interesting. All right. Thank you for answering that. And sorry that I jumped in line, everybody, but I just couldn't resist asking. And with that, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Diane Goldenberg Hart with CNI, and welcome to Jeff Oliver. And thank you for giving that great talk. And welcome to all of our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us as part of CNI's Spring 2020 virtual meeting. We're really grateful to you for making time out of your day to join us. And with that, I will invite our attendees to please go ahead and type in any questions you might have in the Q&A, and I will read them aloud so Jeff can answer them live. Or if you prefer, type them into chat and I will read those too. Questions, comments, anything you'd like to say. And I see that we actually do have a question already that comes to us from Amanda Henley, who was one of the presenters in our last webinar this afternoon. Amanda writes, "This looks like an amazing program. I wonder about the hours. It seems like the need for consultations would easily fill 15 hours. Have you had trouble with students running out of time?"
We have not. And again, part of this is we try to remind students to be mindful of their time and to remember that their primary goal should be to go ahead and get a degree while they're here. But I mean, there's only so much I can do to tell students, don't spend too much time on this stuff. And I think they probably all go over. And I think to some degree, the way I look at it is we really we really make sure that they are not spending too much time on them, and really tell them to back off if they are. But they are, I think, when they go beyond the 15, 30 hours, they're getting experience that I think is making them more competitive for whatever comes next in their careers.
Yeah.
It's something that we're trying to assess, just the impact. One of the things that we do at the end of each cohort is we have a self-assessment. And so we're trying to get feedback on how much time are they spending? Is this something that's too much? But it really does seem like none of them feel too pressed for time for the ambassadorship. But it's something that I actually want to spend a little bit more time to focus on. So that's a great question, Amanda. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thanks. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for the answer, Jeff. And we have another question that came in from Jill Sexton, who asks, are students largely providing consulting services to their peers, to researchers, or both? And I'll take the liberty of just adding to that, Cliff ran a series of roundtables in April talking about research continuity. And one of the things that we heard in there was that a lot of faculty members are realizing the gaps in their knowledge and how much they've been relying on their students and are seeking training now as a result of the current crisis. So I'll throw that in there as well to append to Jill's question.
Yeah, great question, Jill. Great add on there, Diane. The answer is both. So they are both providing support for their peers, and that may be the majority of the support that they're providing, given one, the numbers, and two, sort of who's doing the work. So a lot of times it's graduate students who are tasked with data analyses and PIs, a little bit less so. But I would say that it is mostly peers, but they are very frequently going beyond their own, I would say, department and extending support more towards a college level. Because even though a graduate student in linguistics may not necessarily know that much about sociology, they still are close enough discipline-wise that it's easier for them to talk about applications and challenges than it may be for me, who's a biologist, to address those things. So I would say that they're providing support for both peers as well as PIs. Although in the case of the PIs, it may be sort of an issue of really filling in those gaps that Diane was talking about earlier. Good question, Jill.
Interesting, thank you. And another question from Nancy Hobel-Heinrich. She asks, how are the students deciding what kind of workshops are offered, e.g. the carpentries workshop that I think you mentioned? Are those for specific colleges or cross colleges?
Yeah, so the answer to that is also probably both. The carpentries workshops, those are organized outside of the Data Science Ambassadors program. We have a unit on campus that organizes and coordinates the carpentries workshops. Software carpentry workshops that we run are domain independent. So those cut across all domains. We have run a couple of data carpentry workshops, data carpentry for image processing and data carpentry for GIS data and analyses. And those the data science ambassadors who have expertise in those domains, those are the ones that they help out. As far as the individual workshops that they are providing, that's something that we actually work with them to identify appropriate sized audiences. So we're a little bit less keen to have ambassadors run a workshop where the only attendees may be their lab group, because then you don't have quite the reach that you would like to have with the ambassadorship program.
Right.
So what we do is we try to provide enough guidance so that they can create a workshop and a space that will be accessible to at least a departmental, if not a college level audience. So good question. It's a little tricky, right? Every situation requires a little bit of different attention, but it's I think it ends up being worth the effort to try to identify the appropriate audiences.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Thank you for the question, Nancy. Thank you for addressing that, Jeff. And we have another question from Amanda now. Amanda asks, are the ambassadors given space in the library to work? And where are they located on the org chart?
Oh, so that's a good question. So the ambassadors are, for the most part, not provided space in the library. The library, the University of Arizona Library is in the middle of, towards the end of some significant construction with the library space. And so ambassadors are not given explicit workspaces. They, ideally, as a graduate student, you have that provided by your lab. Although the library does provide that for graduate students who do not have that. But I will say that if ambassadors need space for consultation or they need space to run a workshop, that is something that we work with them to provide space in the library. The library just opened up a new area. It's called the Catalyst Studios. It includes both our data science area, as well as a brand new makerspace, as well as a variety of consultation rooms. And the ambassadors have been making quite a bit of use of that area to provide support in data science. But one of the things that I think the ambassadors are really good at too is also meeting scholars where they're at. So meeting in whatever college or department the folks who need the support are. Yeah, it would be, yeah, it's interesting to think more about that, about how do we provide that space so that they can provide more support. That's a good question, Amanda. I'll have to think more about that one.
We just heard about the Catalyst Studios last week.
Great, yeah.
Project briefing at CNI was fascinating and looks like a really exciting space. So
it's super exciting. It's so nice to have that space. Yep.
Terrific. Okay, thanks for that, Amanda. And from Cliff Lynch, we have a question. Cliff asks, what's the duration of an ambassadorship and can they be renewed?
Excellent question. So we're sort of thinking about that right now, what that looks like. So the duration of an ambassadorship is one academic year. Start in the fall and you go through spring. But one of the things that we sort of miss out on when we do that is we miss out on continuity to some degree. Mm-hmm. So each cohort is independent and each cohort sort of starts anew. But I think what we're going to do this fall is we may experiment with a couple of senior ambassadors. So we're asking, there's a pair of ambassadors in the current cohort who are not graduating next year. And so we're going to try to work out something and ask them to be senior ambassadors. We're not sure exactly what that looks like. We're still working through it. But I think that would provide an important level of continuity and mentoring from one cohort to the next. So thanks for the question, Cliff.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And what a great opportunity for the students.
Yep.
Well, we had lots of great questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for that. And Jeff, thank you. We're drawing close to the end of our time. If you have another question, please feel free to type it in. But I also just want to let folks know that we do have the capacity to unmute you if you're interested in making a comment live, asking a question live. So if you would like to do that now, we are recording, and if you would like to do that on the recording, please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you. And I'm sorry, I will unmute you because I can call on you all I want and nothing will change unless I actually unmute you. So, but go ahead and raise your hand or type in your question. And while we're waiting to see if there are any other questions or if anyone would like to make a comment, I just want to go ahead and share with you in the chat box there a direct link to the schedule for CNI's Spring 2020 virtual meeting, which will be continuing on through the end of May. So we have lots and lots of webinars yet to come, and I hope you'll take a look at that, sign up for some, and let us know what you think. So looking at our boxes now, I see we don't have any more questions. So I want to just thank you again, Jeff. This was such an interesting talk, and we really appreciate you coming to CNI to talk about your project and the ambassadors at Arizona. It was fascinating. And please go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say thank you. It was cool to talk.
And thank you also to all of our attendees. It was great to have you here. So.